The Concorde Ring was the largest structure Nathan Cole had ever seen. It was a space station the size of a small moon, built in the shape of a perfect circle, orbiting a pale white star that belonged to no one. This was where the Federation conducted its business, where treaties were signed and wars were ended. Every species that had ever joined the Federation had walked through its halls and agreed to its terms. Now it was humanity's turn. Nathan arrived with a small delegation. Laura Griffin came as military liaison, wearing her dress uniform and looking like she would rather be anywhere else. Priya Nolan came as technical consultant, carrying a datapad loaded with information she hoped she would not have to use. A handful of junior diplomats and translators rounded out the group. They were given quarters on the station's outer ring. The rooms were clean and comfortable, but noticeably smaller than those given to established member species. Nathan did not complain. He understood the message. Humanity was the newcomer here, and newcomers were expected to be humble. The first week of negotiations went smoothly. The Federation's lead negotiator was Counselor Vethis of the Chiral, an insectoid creature with 4 arms, compound eyes, and a voice that clicked softly between words. Vethis was polite and professional. He guided the talks through trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, border protocols, and mutual defense arrangements. Nathan found him reasonable and even likable in a careful sort of way. They agreed on most things without much difficulty. Humanity would open its borders to Federation trade ships. The Federation would grant human scientists access to certain shared research databases. Both sides would exchange ambassadors and establish permanent diplomatic missions. It was all very civilized and very routine. Then came the 7th day. Counselor Vethis cleared his throat, which sounded like 2 stones being rubbed together, and raised the subject that everyone had been waiting for. He explained that it was customary for new member species to contribute their most significant technological achievement to the Federation's shared science repository. This was not a demand, he said. It was a tradition, a gesture of trust and commitment to the partnership. Every species that had joined the Federation had done so willingly. He looked at Nathan and asked if humanity was prepared to contribute the Vance drive. Nathan did not pause. He did not look at his notes. He simply said, "No." The room went still. It was the kind of silence that has weight to it, the kind that presses against your ears. Counselor Vethis tilted his head, his compound eyes catching the light in a dozen different colors. He asked Nathan to repeat himself, suggesting gently that there might have been a translation error. Nathan repeated himself. Humanity was grateful for the invitation and excited to cooperate in many areas. But the Vance drive and all research connected to it were classified sovereign technology. They would not be shared. The reaction came in waves. First, there was confusion, then disbelief, then anger. A representative of the Ool Collective, a hive-minded species that had contributed its entire biological database when it joined, stood up and called the refusal an insult to the Federation and everything it stood for. A delegate from the Voron Dominion slammed his fist on the table and demanded to know what kind of partner refuses to share. High Speaker Torvon watched from the observation gallery above the negotiation chamber. He had not expected this. His golden eyes narrowed, and his clawed hands gripped the railing in front of him. For the first time in a very long time, he had misjudged a species. Counselor Vethis, to his credit, remained calm. He suggested a compromise. Perhaps humanity could share a limited version of the technology, something stripped of its most sensitive components. Or perhaps Federation scientists could study the drive under controlled conditions, with human oversight. He was trying to find a middle ground, and Nathan appreciated the effort. But Nathan said no, again. That evening, the human delegation gathered in their quarters for a private meeting. The mood was tense. The junior diplomats looked worried. Priya Nolan sat in the corner, with her arms crossed, her face tight with frustration. Laura Griffin spoke first. She said Nathan had done the right thing. She pulled up classified intelligence reports on her datapad and showed the group what Earth's military analysts had been tracking for months. At least 3 Federation species maintained fleets large enough to conquer human space if they had the speed to reach it. The only thing preventing that was the fact that human ships were faster than anything else in the galaxy. Give away the Vance drive, and that advantage disappears overnight. Priya pushed back. She said that hiding behind military logic was short-sighted. The Federation had maintained peace for over 1,000 years. Refusing to share would make humanity look selfish and paranoid. It would poison every relationship they were trying to build. She asked Nathan if he was really prepared to isolate Earth from the rest of the galaxy over a single technology. Nathan listened to both of them. He sat quietly for a long time, turning a pen over in his fingers, a habit he had never been able to break. Then he said something that settled the argument, at least for the moment. He told Priya that he understood her concerns and that she was not wrong about the risks of isolation. But he asked her to consider a different question. If humanity shared the Vance drive and something went wrong, if a hostile species used it to build warships that could strike Earth before anyone could react, could she live with that? Could she look at the people who would suffer and tell them that she gave away their only protection because she believed in the goodness of strangers? Priya did not answer. She stared at the floor and said nothing. The next morning, Nathan sent a coded message back to Earth through a secure channel. It was short and direct. He told General Price that the Federation had made its request and that he had refused. He warned that the response had been hostile and that pressure would follow. He asked for instructions. Price's reply came 2 hours later. It was even shorter. Hold the line. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Concord Ring, High Speaker Torvan was already planning his next move. He called a private meeting with representatives from the Rathani Military Council and 2 allied species. He told them that humanity's refusal was unacceptable and that it could not be allowed to stand. If the humans would not share willingly, then other methods would have to be considered. Councillor Vethis was not invited to that meeting. He learned about it later, from a Dravani colleague who had heard rumors. Vethis sat alone in his office, his 4 hands folded together, and thought carefully about what was happening. He had served the Federation for decades, and he believed in its principles. But he was beginning to wonder if everyone else did too. The negotiations continued the next day, but the warmth was gone. The alien delegates spoke to the human team with a coolness that had not been there before. Deals that had been nearly finished were suddenly reopened for review. Small delays appeared everywhere, like cracks spreading through glass. Nathan noticed all of it. He kept his face neutral and his voice steady. He signed what he could, argued where he had to, and gave nothing away. But he knew this was only the beginning. The pressure did not come all at once. It came slowly, like water rising in a room, so gradual that by the time you noticed it, you were already up to your neck. The first sign was the trade delays. Shipments of rare minerals that human colonies needed for power generation and medical equipment were suddenly held up at Federation customs stations. The official reason was always paperwork. A form was missing, a certificate had expired, an inspection was required. Each delay was small on its own, but together they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. Then came the media campaign. Federation news networks, which broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy, began running stories about humanity's refusal to share the Vance drive. The tone was not openly hostile at first. It was more like disappointment. Reporters would interview alien scientists who shook their heads sadly and talked about how sharing knowledge was the foundation of galactic civilization. Commentators would ask, what kind of species joins a community but refuses to contribute? The message was clear. Humanity was selfish. Humanity could not be trusted. And then, One by one, Federation ambassadors began leaving Earth. The Rathani recalled theirs first, followed by the Ul Collective and the Varan Dominion. Within 2 weeks, 6 species had pulled their diplomats from human space. The embassies sat empty, their windows dark, like closed eyes. On Earth, the effects were felt quickly. The outer colonies, which depended on imported materials that could not be found in human space, began running short on supplies. A mining colony on the world called Haven's Rest reported that its medical fabricators would run out of raw materials within 3 months. Families on frontier worlds started rationing food, not because there was a famine, but because the ships that carried their supplies were stuck in Federation ports with no explanation. Protests broke out in several cities. People gathered in the streets of New Chicago, Port Meridian, and the domed plazas of Mars, holding signs and shouting at the sky. Some demanded that the government share the technology and end the standoff. Others supported the government's decision and called the Federation bullies. The arguments grew louder and angrier by the day. Nathan Cole returned to Earth for consultations. He looked tired. The circles under his eyes were darker than they had been a month ago, and his suit hung a little looser on his frame. He had not been sleeping well. He met with General Howard Price in a secure room deep beneath the government complex in Geneva. Price was not a man who showed emotion easily, but even he seemed grim as he laid out the latest intelligence on the table. 3 Federation species had been caught attempting to reverse engineer the Vance drive. Their method was clever. They had positioned sensor arrays along the routes that human ships traveled most frequently, disguising them as navigation beacons and communication relays. The sensors were designed to capture the unique energy patterns that the Vance drive produced when it was active. Federation scientists were then using that data to try to reconstruct the technology from scratch. So far, they had failed. The Vance drive's core principles were so different from anything else in the galaxy that the captured data was essentially meaningless without the theoretical framework behind it. But the attempts proved something important. The Federation did not just want the technology as a gesture of goodwill. They wanted it because it was power, and they were willing to steal it if humanity would not hand it over. Nathan was not surprised, but hearing it confirmed still made his stomach tighten. He also met privately with Priya Nolan. She had been quiet since their argument on the Concord Ring, and Nathan was worried about her. When they sat down together in a small cafe near the Geneva waterfront, she told him something that made him set down his coffee and stare at her. A Chiral scientist had contacted Priya 3 days after the negotiations stalled. The scientist was friendly and informal. He said he admired Priya's published work on energy field dynamics and wanted to offer her a prestigious research position at one of the Federation's top universities. The salary was extraordinary. The facilities were beyond anything Earth could offer. All he asked in return was for Priya to have a few casual conversations about general propulsion theory. Nothing classified, he said. Just informal discussions between colleagues. Priya had refused immediately. She recognized the offer for what it was, a recruitment attempt wrapped in flattery. But the experience had shaken her. She had spent her whole career believing that scientists across the galaxy were united by a shared love of knowledge. Now she realized that some of them were just tools of their governments, sent to extract secrets with a smile. She looked at Nathan across the table and told him she understood now. She did not like it, but she understood. Meanwhile, Captain Laura Griffin was dealing with problems of her own. Federation patrol ships had begun appearing near the borders of human space. They came in small groups, 3 or 4 at a time, and they always had an official reason. Training exercises, navigation calibrations, survey missions. But they came more often each week, and they lingered longer each time, drifting just outside the invisible line that marked where human territory began. Laura did not panic. She reinforced the border patrols, repositioning ships from the inner colonies to the frontier. She placed the entire fleet on elevated alert status, which meant that every crew was ready to fight at a moment's notice. And she sent a very polite message to the Federation's Naval Command, noting that human space was clearly marked on every star chart, and that any unauthorized entry would be treated as a hostile act. The Federation did not respond to the message. The patrol ships kept coming. Then came the incident at Haven's Rest. A Federation science vessel, a sleek Rathani ship with a crew of 40, crossed into human territory without warning or permission. It ignored all hails from the local patrol and continued deeper into the system, heading directly toward the colony. Laura's ships intercepted it within the hour. 2 destroyers flanked the Rathani vessel and ordered it to stop. After a tense standoff that lasted 20 minutes, the alien ship finally cut its engines and allowed itself to be escorted back to the border. No weapons were fired. No one was hurt. The Federation's official statement called it a navigation error. The Rathani government expressed regret for the misunderstanding. But Laura's sensor logs told a very different story. The science vessel had been running active scans the entire time it was in human space, sweeping for the same energy signatures that the hidden sensor arrays had been looking for. It was not lost. It was spying. Nathan took the evidence to the Federation Council in a closed session. He did not shout. He did not accuse anyone by name. He simply presented the data, calmly and clearly, and let the council members draw their own conclusions. He said that humanity wanted friendship and cooperation, but it would not accept espionage. He said that trust was earned through honesty, not through hidden sensors and uninvited ships. The chamber was quiet when he finished. Some delegates looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry, though it was hard to tell if their anger was directed at Nathan or at the species that had been caught. After the session, Counselor Vethis found Nathan in the hallway. The Chiral diplomat pulled him aside and spoke in a low, clicking voice. He told Nathan that he respected what humanity was doing, even though he could not say so in public. He warned that High Speaker Torvan was pushing for stronger action, and that the council was splitting into factions. Some wanted to punish humanity. Others thought Torvan had gone too far. The situation was unstable, and Vethis could not predict which way it would fall. Nathan thanked him and walked away. He returned to Unity Point that evening and stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the endless field of stars. Somewhere out there, fleets were gathering and plans were being made. The easy part was over. Everything that came next would be harder. High Speaker Torvan had run out of patience. He stood before the full Federation Council in the great chamber of the Concord Ring and introduced a resolution that he had been drafting in secret for weeks. The document was long, filled with legal language and diplomatic phrasing, but its meaning was simple. It declared that humanity's refusal to share the Vance Drive was a violation of the spirit of the Federation Charter. It called for full economic sanctions against Earth and all its colonies. No trade, no aid, no contact, total isolation, until humanity changed its mind. The chamber buzzed with reaction as the resolution was read aloud. Representatives from dozens of species leaned forward in their seats, whispering to aides and checking their datapads. This was not a small thing. Sanctions of this kind had only been imposed twice in the Federation's history, both times against species that had committed acts of aggression. Humanity had attacked no one. The debate that followed was the most intense the Council had seen in years. The supporters of the resolution spoke first. The Ul Collective's representative, a pale creature that spoke with the combined voice of 1,000 linked minds, argued that the Federation's strength had always come from shared knowledge. Every member species had contributed something vital when it joined. The Rathani had shared their advanced metallurgy. The Shiral had contributed their biological computing systems. The Ul themselves had opened their entire genetic library to the galaxy. Humanity was asking for special treatment, and special treatment was the first step toward inequality. The Voron Dominion's ambassador, a heavy-set being with 4 eyes and a deep rumbling voice, was more blunt. He said that humanity was a small species with a big secret, and that secrets had no place in a community built on trust. If humans could not trust the Federation with one piece of technology, how could the Federation trust humans with anything at all? Several other species echoed these arguments. The momentum in the room seemed to be moving toward Torvon's resolution. Nathan Cole, watching from the visitors' gallery, felt the floor shifting beneath him. Then the opposition spoke. Ambassador Salith of the Dravani rose from her seat. The Dravani were one of the oldest species in the Federation, tall and slender beings, with silver skin and voices that sounded like wind chimes. They had joined the Federation centuries ago, and they had done so reluctantly, only after negotiating terms that protected their most sacred technologies from being shared. The other species had grumbled about it at the time, but the Dravani had held firm, and eventually the matter was forgotten. Salith reminded the council of that history. She spoke quietly, without anger, but every word carried weight. She said that the Federation was founded on voluntary cooperation, not forced compliance. She said that demanding technology from a new species under threat of punishment was not partnership, it was extortion. And she said that if this resolution passed, it would set a precedent that would haunt the Federation for generations, because any species could be next. The chamber fell silent when she finished. Several delegates who had been leaning toward supporting the resolution now looked uncertain. Then Nathan Cole was given the floor. He walked to the podium at the center of the chamber and looked out at the assembled representatives of 47 civilizations. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with hostility, a few with something that might have been respect. Nathan did not beg. He did not apologize. He told a story. He talked about the empires that had risen and fallen over thousands of years, about the wars fought over resources and land and power. He talked about the nations that had shared their secrets with stronger neighbors and been consumed for their generosity. He talked about the treaties that were signed in good faith and broken the moment one side saw an advantage. He said that humanity had learned its lessons the hard way, written in blood across centuries of suffering. And the most important lesson was this: you do not hand your sword to a stranger and hope he does not use it against you. Then he asked the council a question that changed the shape of the debate. He asked them to imagine that humanity shared the Vance drive today. Every species in the Federation would have access to the fastest propulsion system ever built. Trade would benefit. Science would advance. Everyone would celebrate the spirit of cooperation. There were no enforceable arms control agreements in the Federation. Any species could build as many warships as it wanted. Some already had fleets numbering in the thousands. How long, Nathan asked, before someone built a Vance Drive warship and pointed it at Earth? He paused and let the question hang in the air. He watched as several delegates shifted in their seats. He saw Councillor Vethis look away. He saw Torvon's golden eyes narrow. Nathan said he was not accusing anyone. He was simply stating a fact. Humanity was a small civilization surrounded by older and larger ones, and it had exactly one advantage. Asking humanity to give up that advantage on faith alone, without any guarantees of protection, was asking humanity to bet its survival on the goodness of strangers. And history, both human and galactic, had taught him that this was a bet you always lost. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted over each other. Torvon called for order, his deep voice cutting through the noise. Some species demanded an immediate vote. Others called for more time to consider. The vote was held that afternoon. The resolution needed a two-thirds majority to pass. It failed. The margin was narrow. 29 species voted in favor, 18 voted against, and Councillor Vethis abstained. The abstention was seen by everyone as a quiet act of rebellion against Torvan, and it did not go unnoticed. The Dravani, along with the Chiral abstention and a handful of smaller species, had blocked the resolution. Humanity was spared, for now, but the victory came with a price. Torvan, humiliated in front of the entire council, did not accept the result with grace. He cornered Nathan in a corridor after the vote and spoke to him privately, his tall reptilian frame looming over the human diplomat. His voice was low and dangerous. He told Nathan that the council was only one path. There were others. He said that some species did not need the council's permission to act, and that humanity should consider very carefully whether it wanted to continue down this road. Nathan looked up at the high speaker without flinching. He thanked Torvan for his honesty and walked away. That night, General Price contacted Nathan through an emergency channel. The intelligence was alarming. A joint fleet was being assembled near the border of human space. The Rathani were contributing the largest share, but ships from the Ul Collective and the Voron Dominion were joining as well. The official explanation was a routine military exercise, but the fleet's position, its size, and its composition told a different story. This was not an exercise. This was a threat. Nathan immediately contacted Captain Laura Griffin aboard the Steadfast. Laura listened to the briefing without interruption, her face hard and still on the screen. When Nathan finished, she asked one question. "How much time do we have?" Nathan said he did not know. Maybe days, maybe hours. Laura nodded. She ended the call and turned to her bridge crew. She gave the orders calmly, the way she always did, as if she were ordering lunch instead of preparing for the possibility of war. Recall all ships from patrol. Move the fleet to defensive positions along the border. Load weapons, but do not arm them. Power up the Vance drives and stand ready. The crew moved without hesitation. They had trained for this. They had hoped it would never come. Across the border, over 300 alien warships settled into formation, their hulls glowing faintly against the black of space. They were enormous, some of them 10 times the size of the largest human vessel. Their weapons could level cities. Their shields could withstand bombardments that would crack a moon. And the human ships were not. Both sides stared at each other across the void, separated by nothing but empty space and the fragile hope that someone would blink first. The galaxy held its breath, and for a long, terrible moment, the universe was perfectly silent. The human fleet looked like a thin silver thread stretched across the darkness of space. 60 ships, arranged in a loose defensive arc, their hulls catching the faint light of distant stars. On the other side of the border, the coalition fleet spread out like a wall of iron. 312 warships packed together in tight formations, their weapons humming with stored energy. Captain Laura Griffin stood on the bridge of the Steadfast and studied the tactical display in front of her. The numbers were not in her favor. They never had been. But Laura had not built her career on favorable numbers. She had built it on speed, discipline, and the willingness to do what the enemy did not expect. Every captain in the human fleet had received the same battle plan weeks ago. They had rehearsed it in secret, running simulation after simulation, until the maneuvers were burned into their memories. The plan was simple in concept and brutal in execution. If the coalition fleet crossed the border, the human ships would not meet them head-on. That would be suicide. Instead, they would scatter, using the Vance drive to jump across the battlefield in seconds, striking from angles that the larger ships could not track, hitting critical systems and disappearing before the enemy could return fire. It was not a strategy designed to destroy the coalition fleet. It was designed to cripple it without killing anyone. Laura had insisted on that. She wanted to win, but she did not want a massacre on her conscience. While Laura prepared for the worst, Nathan Cole fought for the best. He had requested an emergency session of the Federation Council, but Torvon had blocked it, citing procedural rules that he had almost certainly invented on the spot. The council could not convene without the High Speaker's approval, and Torvon had no intention of giving Nathan another platform. So Nathan went around him. He contacted every major news network in the Federation and requested airtime for a public address. Some refused. Others, sensing the biggest story in a generation, agreed immediately. Within hours, Nathan's face was being broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy. He stood in a small recording studio aboard Unity Point, wearing a simple dark suit, and spoke directly into the camera. There were no dramatic gestures, no raised voice. He spoke the way he always did, quietly and clearly, like a man telling the truth to a friend. He told the galaxy what had happened. He explained that humanity had been invited to join the Federation, had accepted with gratitude, and had asked only to keep one thing for itself. He described the espionage attempts, the trade blockades, the diplomatic pressure, and the media campaign designed to paint humans as selfish. And he described the fleet that was now sitting on the edge of human space, 300 warships pointed at a civilization of a few billion people whose only crime was saying no. He asked the citizens of the Federation a question, not their leaders, not their generals, the ordinary people who lived their lives and raised their families under the Federation's banner. He asked them if this was the galaxy they wanted to live in. A galaxy where a young species could be threatened with destruction for refusing to hand over its greatest achievement. A galaxy where no meant war. The broadcast ended, and Nathan stepped out of the studio. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his legs and took a slow breath. There was nothing more he could do with words. The rest was up to Laura. The response to the broadcast was immediate and enormous. Across the Federation, people reacted. On the Dravani homeworld, crowds gathered outside government buildings in support of humanity. On dozens of other worlds, citizens flooded public forums with messages questioning their leaders' actions. The Dravani government issued a formal statement condemning the military buildup and announced that it was severing diplomatic relations with the Rithani until the fleet was withdrawn. Even within the coalition, cracks began to appear. The Voron Dominion, which had joined reluctantly and under pressure from Torvon, quietly pulled half its ships back from the border. Their commanders had watched Nathan's broadcast too, and some of them did not like what they saw in the mirror. But Torvon was not finished. He had staked his reputation and his legacy on bringing humanity to heel, and he was not prepared to back down in front of the entire galaxy. He sent the order to the remaining fleet. Cross the border. Enter human space. Force the humans to submit. The coalition fleet moved. 240 warships surged forward, crossing the invisible line that separated Federation space from humanity's territory. Alarms screamed across every human ship. Tactical displays lit up red. Laura Griffin did not hesitate. She gave the order, and the human fleet came alive. The Vance Drive ships moved in ways that the coalition commanders had never seen before. One moment they were in front of you, the next they were behind you. They appeared at the flanks of the coalition formation, fired precise bursts at engine systems and weapon arrays, and vanished before a single shot could be aimed in return. They moved through the coalition fleet like wind through tall grass. Untouchable, relentless, and terrifyingly fast. They fired their weapons into empty space where human ships had been half a second earlier. They tried to close ranks and create a defensive formation, but the human ships simply jumped past their lines and struck from the inside. Communication relays were knocked out first, blinding the coalition's coordination. Then came the engines, one ship after another losing power as precision strikes severed their drive systems. Weapons platforms went dark. Shield generators overloaded and shut down. Laura commanded the battle from the Steadfast's bridge with a calm that bordered on eerie. She called out targets, adjusted formations, and tracked every ship on the field with the focus of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. Not a single coalition ship was destroyed. Not a single crew member was killed. Every strike was calculated to disable, not to end lives. Within 6 hours, it was over. The coalition fleet drifted in the darkness, powerless and silent. 240 warships, the pride of 3 civilizations, hung motionless in the void like fallen leaves on still water. Their crews were alive, their life support systems carefully left intact, but they could not move, could not fight, and could not run. Laura opened a channel to the coalition flagship, a massive Rithani dreadnought that now floated dark and helpless at the center of the field. She identified herself, congratulated the enemy commander on the courage of his crews, and offered to send repair teams to assist with restoring basic systems. The Rithani commander accepted. His voice was flat, stripped of pride, carrying only the hollow exhaustion of a man who had just learned something he would never forget. The aftermath moved quickly. The Federation Council convened an emergency session, and this time no one could block it. Torvon was brought before the full assembly and formally censured for ordering a military action without council approval. He was stripped of his title as High Speaker and removed from office. His golden eyes burned with fury as he left the chamber, but he went quietly. There was nothing left to fight with. Councillor Vethis was appointed as interim High Speaker. His first act was to open direct talks with Nathan Cole. The agreement they reached was unlike anything the Federation had seen before. Humanity was granted full membership without the technology sharing requirement. The Vance Drive would remain human property, classified and protected. In return, humanity agreed to a mutual defense pact. If any external threat endangered Federation space, human ships would respond. The fastest fleet in the galaxy would serve as the Federation's shield, not because it was forced to, but because it chose to. It was a compromise that gave everyone what they actually needed. The Federation gained protection it could not build for itself. Humanity gained the respect it had been denied. The signing ceremony was held aboard Unity Point, in the same grand hall where the journey had begun months earlier. There were no lavish decorations this time, no long speeches. Nathan Cole and Councillor Vethis sat at a plain table, read the agreement aloud, and signed it. They shook hands, or rather, Nathan shook one of Vethis's 4 hands, and the room offered a quiet round of applause. Afterward, Nathan found Laura and Priya on the observation deck. The 3 of them stood together, looking out at the stars through the wide curved windows. None of them spoke for a while. They did not need to. Priya broke the silence first. She told Nathan she had been wrong. Not about the value of sharing knowledge, she still believed in that. But she had been wrong about the timing. Sharing the Vance Drive before humanity had earned the galaxy's respect would not have made them a partner. It would have made them a resource to be used up and forgotten. Respect had to come first. Generosity could follow later, when it would be received as a gift and not taken as weakness. Laura, leaning against the window with her arms folded, simply said that the fleet would stay ready. Trust was good. Readiness was better. Nathan smiled. It was small and tired, but it was real. 5 years later, Earth had become one of the most influential voices on the Federation Council. Other young species, inspired by humanity's example, had begun pushing back against the old tradition of mandatory technology sharing. A new amendment to the Federation Charter formally recognized the right of any member species to protect its sovereign innovations. The amendment was called the Cole Provision, though Nathan always said he did not deserve the credit. The Vance Drive remained humanity's secret, But humanity itself was no longer a secret to anyone. Across the galaxy, people knew the name of the small blue world on the edge of the spiral arm. They knew it not because humans had conquered anyone, and not because they had given everything away. They knew it because, when the entire galaxy told them to kneel, they stood up instead. And the galaxy was better for it. The message came on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. For almost 300 years, humanity had looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was out there. They sent signals, built telescopes, and launched probes into the darkness. And for 300 years, the universe answered with silence. Then, in the year 2297, a ship appeared at the edge of the solar system. It was enormous, shaped like a curved blade, and it carried a message that the people of Earth had waited generations to hear. You are not alone. The ship belonged to the Galactic Federation, a coalition of 47 spacefaring species that had been watching humanity for decades. They had seen humans split the atom, walk on the moon, and build colonies on Mars and beyond. But what finally caught their attention was something else entirely. A human scientist named Dr. Samuel Vance had built a propulsion engine so advanced that it made every other drive system in the galaxy look like a horse and cart. The Vance drive, as it came to be known, could move a ship across an entire star system in hours. No other species had anything close to it. The Federation wanted that technology, but first they had to be polite about it. They sent an invitation. Humanity was formally asked to join the Galactic Federation as a full member species. It was presented as an honor, a recognition of humanity's achievements and potential. A grand ceremony was planned aboard Unity Point, Earth's largest orbital station, and dozens of alien dignitaries traveled across the galaxy to attend. The man chosen to represent humanity at the ceremony was Nathan Cole. He was a diplomat from Houston, 53 years old, with gray at his temples, and a quiet way of speaking that made people lean in to listen. He had spent 20 years negotiating trade deals and border disputes between Earth's colonies, and he was very good at reading the room. When the Earth government asked him to lead the talks with the Federation, he accepted without hesitation. Standing beside him was Captain Laura Griffin, a naval officer who commanded the warship Steadfast. Laura was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried herself like someone who had seen combat and did not enjoy talking about it. She was there to remind the aliens, politely, that humanity was not defenseless. Her ship floated just outside Unity Point, its hull gleaming under the starlight, and every alien delegate who arrived had to fly past it on their way in. The third member of the core team was Dr. Priya Nolan, a physicist who had worked alongside Samuel Vance during the final years of the drive's development. She understood the technology at a level that very few humans did, and she had been brought along to advise Nathan on any technical questions that might come up during negotiations. Priya was younger than the other two, barely 40, and she still carried the wide-eyed enthusiasm of someone who believed that science could fix anything. The ceremony itself was spectacular. Unity Point's Grand Hall had been decorated with banners from all 47 Federation species. Alien delegates of every shape and size filled the room. Some were tall and thin, others short and covered in scales. A few floated in gravity-assisted chairs. The air smelled faintly of a dozen different atmospheres mixed together. At the center of it all stood High Speaker Torvan of the Rithani. He was the most powerful figure in the Federation, a towering reptilian creature with dark green skin and golden eyes that never seemed to blink. He had welcomed 12 new species into the Federation during his time as High Speaker, and he considered himself something of an expert on the process. Young civilizations, he had learned, were always eager. They wanted trade, protection, and prestige, and they were willing to give up almost anything to get it. Torvan gave a long and gracious speech about unity and progress. He spoke about how the Federation had brought peace to a galaxy that had once been torn apart by war. He praised humanity's courage and creativity. He said all the right things in all the right ways, and the audience clapped politely when he was done. Then Nathan Cole took the stage. He thanked the Federation for the invitation. He spoke about humanity's long journey to the stars and its desire to build friendships with other civilizations. He was warm, respectful, and careful. He accepted the invitation to begin formal membership talks, and the crowd applauded again. But Nathan knew something that most of the people in that room did not. 2 hours before the ceremony, he had received a private briefing from General Howard Price, the head of Earth's Combined Defense Council. Price was a hard man, with a shaved head and a voice like gravel, and he did not waste time on pleasantries. He sat Nathan down in a secure room aboard Unity Point, and laid out the situation in plain terms. The Vance Drive was humanity's single greatest advantage. It was the only reason the Federation had even bothered to invite them. Without it, Earth was a small and unimportant world on the edge of the galaxy, home to a species that had only been in space for a few centuries. With it, humanity had something that every other civilization wanted. And that made it both valuable and dangerous. Price told Nathan that under no circumstances was the Vance Drive or any related research to be shared with the Federation. Not as a gift, not as a trade, not as a gesture of goodwill. The technology was classified at the highest level, and it would stay that way. Nathan understood. He had suspected this would be the order, and he agreed with it. Laura Griffin, who attended the briefing as well, simply nodded. She had spent her career studying the military capabilities of the Federation's member species, and she knew that several of them maintained fleets that could crush humanity's navy in a straight fight. The Vance Drive was the only thing that kept the balance. Give it away, and Earth would have nothing left to bargain with, and nothing left to defend itself with either. Priya Nolan was a different matter. When Nathan told her the decision privately after the briefing, she frowned. She believed that knowledge belonged to everyone, and that hoarding it was wrong. But she also trusted Nathan, and she could see the logic in his argument, even if she did not like it. She agreed to follow the orders, though she made it clear that she was not happy about it. The ceremony ended late in the evening. The alien delegates returned to their ships, full of good food and pleasant conversation. High Speaker Torvon retired to his private quarters and called his senior aide to his side. He told the aide that everything was going according to plan. The humans were young, eager, and predictable. They would share their technology within a month, just like every other species before them. Torvon leaned back in his chair and closed his golden eyes. He was certain of it.